Hey, greetings there, everybody. It is GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On my last one, we looked at some rules for Dungeons and Dragons, basically, even though it was in the Warcraft setting. It was just all Dungeons and Dragons basic rules. Um, so we've also been reading, some side lore, which we're actually pretty much all done with. Um, and That's talking fantasy football with one of my buddies. Um, so we looked at we're pretty much all done with it. We did the Chronicles and the we're in that 25th year, the year that Classic came out. There's one or two more little pieces we'd probably wrap up before we actually start playing World of Warcraft. And that's it. We've done all the catch up material. It's really just Cycle of Hatred and a pinch more Chronicles. So cool, we're getting there. In Cycle of Hatred, last we saw was one of Jaina's guys. He was investigating the burning blade, and he was found by the demon and killed. So stay a while and listen as we continue the story with Chapter 11 of Cycle of Hatred. Muzzle Crank used to like being a goblin bruiser. Truly, it had been easy work when he first signed up. Bruisers enforced the peace in Ratchet, and the pay was good. Muzzle Crank's shifts were spent wandering up and down his section of the pier at Ratchet, beating up the occasional drunk or vagabond, taking bribes from shipmasters, moving contraband, arresting the ones who were too stupid or too cheap to pay bribes, and generally getting to meet all manner of people. Muzzle Crank had always thought of himself as a people person. Ratchet was a neutral port. Goblins, as a rule, did not take sides in the numerous conflicts that ravaged the land, and as a result, pretty much every type of creature you would like to find in the world came through at some point or other. Elves, dwarves, humans, orcs, trolls, ogres, even the occasional gnome. It was the crossroads of Kalimdor. Muzzlecrank always liked seeing the different interactions, whether it was dwarves shipping construction materials to elves, elves shipping jewelry to humans, orcs shipping crops to elves, humans shipping fish to ogres, or trolls shipping weapons to pretty much anyone. Lately, though, things had gotten somewhat less pleasant, especially between the humans and the orcs, which was problematic insofar as the most common patriots of Ratchet were those two races. Ratchet was right at Duratar's southernmost border and was the nearest port to Theramore as well. Just last week, he had to break up a fight between an orc sailor and a human merchant. The former had apparently stepped on the latter's toe, and the human took umbrage. Muzzlecrank had been forced to break them up before the orc beat the human into a pulp, which hadn't been any fun at all. Muzzlecrank preferred to get into fights with vagabonds and drunks because they were kind enough not to fight back. Fighting mad orcs were another kettle of grease entirely, and Muzzlecrank preferred to stay as far away from them as possible. Fights like that usually meant that he had to draw his net gun, and every time he did that, he ran the risk of someone figuring out that he was really bad at using the stupid thing. Oh, sure, he could fire it easily enough. Any idiot could do that. Just point and pull the trigger, and a compressed airburst sent a net out to snare whatever he was shooting at. But his aim was lousy, and then it always missed the target and usually made a big mess. Luckily, the sight of a bruiser pointing a gun with a giant muzzle at you was enough to stop most fights, or at least slow them down long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Since then, no more actual fights had broken out, but there were a lot more terse words and heated exchanges happening. It had gotten to the point where many of the merchant ships were now coming into Ratchet with armed escorts, the orc vessels with warriors from Orgrimmar, the human ships with soldiers from Northwatch. Muzzlecrank's beat was the northernmost section of the pier, a section that had 20 berths. As Muzzlecrank wandered down the wooden plank pier, he saw that 15 of the 20 docks were filled, but things were mostly quiet. This was a huge relief. The sun shone down on his face, warming him in his mail armor. Perhaps today would be a good day. After a few minutes, the sun went away. Muzzlecrank glanced up to see that several clouds had rolled in, and it looked likely to rain soon. Muzzlecrank sighed. He hated rain. As he neared the end of the dock, he saw a human and an orc having an animated conversation. Muzzlecrank didn't like the look of this. Animated conversations between humans and orcs, these days, tended to end in violence. He moved in closer. The human's boat was docked right next to the orcs, in the two northernmost berths. Muzzlecrank recognized the orc as Captain Klatt of the Rachnoor, a merchant who served as the dealer of crops from the farmers in the Razor Hill region. Though he could not remember the human's name, Muzzlecrank knew his ship was a fishing trawler called the Passion's Reward for some odd reason. Muzzlecrank had never understood human naming conventions. Klatt had named the Rachnoor after his brother, who died fighting the Burning Legion, but he hadn't the first clue what the name Passion's Reward had to do with anything, least of all fishing. The exchange was a common one. Farming was difficult in the Dustwallow marshes where humans had settled on Kalimdor, but there was plenty of fishing. Razor Hill, meanwhile, was too far inland for fishing to be practical, so humans often traded their surplus catches for the orc surplus crops. "I will not trade you my finest salmon for this refuse," Muzzlecrank sighed. Obviously, today was not going to go well. Klatt stomped his foot. "Refuse! You lying little twerp! These are our best crops!" "A sad commentary on your farming," the human said dryly. "That fruit looks as though it was stepped on by an ogre. Smells like it, too. I ain't gonna stand here and be insulted by a human." The human drew himself up to full height, which made him come up to the orc's shoulders. "You're not the one being insulted here. I've brought you my finest catch, and you offer me the bottom of the barrel in exchange." "Your salmon ain't fit for mulch." Too late, Muzzlecrank noticed that the human was armed with what looked like a longsword, while Klatt was weaponless. Assuming the human was skilled in the blade's use, it negated whatever advantage Klatt's size gave him in a fight. "And your fruit isn't fit for dogs." "Coward!" Muzzlecrank winced at Klatt's words. Coward was the biggest insult any orc could deliver. "Filthy greenskin! I've half a mind to." Whatever the human had half a mind to do was lost as Klatt charged him. The human was unable to unsheathe his longsword in time, and the two of them rolled across the dock, Klatt pummeling the human. Wondering how precisely he was supposed to break this up, he was relieved of immediate action by the human's escort. 3 guards wearing the plate armor that signified they were part of Lady Proudmoore's forces leapt out of the Passion's Reward and pried Klatt off the captain. However, Klatt would not be dissuaded by a mere 3 humans. He punched one in the stomach, grabbed the second, and threw him into the third. Now the orcs were starting to move off the Rachnoor to join in the fray. Muzzlecrank realized he had to do something before this got out of hand. Hefting his nutgun and hoping with all his heart and soul that he wouldn't be called upon to use it, he bellowed, "All right, that's it. Cut it out, and I mean now, or all ya in deep. Understand?" Klatt, who was about to jump on the human captain, stopped in his tracks. His target, blood gushing from his nose and mouth, cried, "You talk to me!" The human's voice had an odd twang to it that was probably the result of damage to his nose. Well, you deserved it, going back on your word like that," Klatt said with a sneer. "That's no reason to kill a man." "I said cut it out." Muzzlecrank spoke before Klatt could respond. "Both of you are under arrest. You either come peaceable like or in pieces. Makes me no never mind." He looked at both the orc warriors and the human soldiers. "This here's goblin country, and that means I give the orders here. Got it? So that gives you 2 choices. Help me put these 2 in the hoosegow till an arbiter can take the case, or get your keisters out of Ratchet. Your choice." Technically, Muzzlecrank's words were true. He had deliberately deepened his voice in the hope that it would give him his words an air of authority, but he also knew that he had no way of stopping any of these people if they decided to ignore him and continue fighting. If he shot the net gun, he'd just get one of the tether posts covered in a net or something. To his relief, one of the humans said, "We'll do as you wish." Apparently, the orcs weren't about to be seen to be violating the goblin's sovereignty on Ratchet when the humans were, and so one of the orcs quickly said, "So will we." As they led Klatt and the bleeding human back to the mainland, Muzzlecrank tried to get his breathing under control before he hyperventilated. He wasn't meant for this kind of stress. He wondered what other job he'd be good at. Being a bruiser had definitely lost its appeal. Major Davin was so angry he started pulling at his beard and had to consciously force himself to stop. The last time he got that angry, he ripped tufts out, which not only was painful but violated the dress code. The focus of his ire was the substance of Corporal Reich's report, given after his hasty return to Northwatch from Ratchet. "They actually arrested Captain Jock." Well, to be fair, sir, Reich said, they've done arrested that orc there too, sir. As soon as the argument headed up, one of the goblin brewers started to step in. And you let them arrest Jock? Reich blinked. I ain't have no choice, sir. Gods have got jurisdiction in Ratchet. We ain't got no... Davin shook his head. No authority, I know. Well, I think that's... I don't remember which one this is. He got up from his chair and started pacing the office, walking toward the door at first. It is ridiculous. We shouldn't be subject to this kind of idiocy. Sir, I want to say you up, Helmy. The orcs have a nerve trying to cheat us like that. He turned and paced toward the window. Nodding his head quickly, Reich said, That's certainly true, sir. Folks they done offer us, well, they was just vile, sir. An insult he was. And then the orc, he done attack the captain for no reason either. The major stopped pacing when he reached the window. He stared out at the view of the great sea. Small waves lapped gently against the sandy beach. Painted a peaceful picture, one that Davin knew was deceptive. This is out of control. If the orcs keep on like this, it's only a matter of time before we're at war once again. I don't think that'll be happening, sir. Reich sounded skeptical, but Davin knew better. Oh, it will, Corporal, of that you can be absolutely sure. And with the Tauren and the Trolls on their side, they will overwhelm us. Unless we are prepared. He turned to the door. Private O'Reilly came in. As always, when he saw his aide, Davin sighed. No matter how many times the young private was fitted, his armor was always too big on him. Yes, sir. Send a message to Theramore right away. We need reinforcements as soon as possible. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. O'Reilly saluted and left the watch office to go find the scrying stone that Lady Proudmoore had provided to facilitate communication between Northwatch and Theramore. Detailed conversations couldn't be held through it, but messages could be sent. Reich scratched his cheek thoughtfully. Sir, with all due respect, no. It's been such a good idea, sir. Very much so. Davin sat back down at his desk, no longer feeling the need to rip out his beard hairs, now that he was taking action. I'm not letting those green-skinned bastards catch us off guard. I can't remember who Davin is, if he's that snooty guy, but I don't think he is. I think he's just some dude. Alright, tensions are continuing to mount, which is just the theme of this novel. Cool. Thank you so much for watching and listening to another episode of Lore of Warcraft. I look forward to seeing everybody next time. This one, in the pipe, 5x5.